you have power over every interaction you have. Your organization cannot take away your interactional power, the power to show up and make the next person you interact with feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. You'll notice this in the book. A lot of my case studies are with middle team leaders who choose to reclaim their interactional power, to not become the leader they don't want, and become the leader, as Simon Sinek says, to become the leader they wish they had. But they choose to architect their daily interactions in which other people feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. They choose to assess themselves on this. They choose to assess their teams on this. And then all of a sudden, what happens in the organization is people start asking me, Zach, can you go see what's happening in this team? What are they doing differently? And that's how a lot of these movements and organizations I've seen grow from the grassroots.
Welcome to E3, Engage and Empower with Empathy, a podcast brought to you by the Empathy Collective, a consulting firm that helps business leaders inspire change, one conversation at a time. I'm Rebecca Dreamy, your host and founder of the Empathy Collective, and we are building a community of like-minded leaders and experts who all share the same passion, taking care of people at work. Whether you are a plant manager trying to humanize the factory floor, a small business owner wanting to build a strong culture that lasts, or a corporate executive striving to prevent burnout in your team, you belong in this community. There's a line in Philip Levine's poem, What Work Is, that lingers long after you read it. He describes men standing in the rain outside the old Ford plant, waiting, hoping, unseen. He writes about the brother you think you recognize in the blur of mist, the one you suddenly realize you love but have never actually told. And then he ends with a truth that lands like a weight. You don't know what work is. It's a poem about labor, yes, but even more, it's a poem about longing. The longing to be chosen, the longing to be valued, the longing to know that your life, your gifts, your effort matter. And in so many ways, that longing persists today, just in quieter, more modern forms. We're no longer standing in the rain outside factories, but too many people are still waiting to be noticed, waiting to be heard, waiting to feel like they belong, waiting for a leader to see the human being beyond the job description. That's why today's conversation feels so vital. Dr. Zach Mercurio, award-winning researcher, author of The Power of Mattering, and one of the most compelling voices in meaningful work, has spent his career uncovering what many leaders miss, that people don't simply want to be productive, they want to be significant. They want to know their presence counts. They want to feel what Levine's character never felt in that line, in that rain, that someone sees them, truly sees them. This is E3. Engage and empower with empathy. Welcome to the show, Zach. It is such a delight to have you here. I've genuinely been looking forward to this dialogue for a long time now. I read your book right after it was released and was really inspired by the message you're delivering in this book. It's so simple, yet so powerful and so impactful. So can't wait to get into this.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. So thanks for your interest.
I'm always curious about the career journey of all my guests. And so before we get into the topic of your book, I'd love to know, how does someone like you end up studying workplace significance? What did that path look like?
Yeah, I think many people who study like meaning and purpose and mattering have often experienced the absence of it. And I find that with many of my colleagues. I was in a job out of university that I had all the objective indicators of success from the outside. I made decent money, worked for a good company using advertising, but I looked around me and everybody around me was living for their weekend. People would talk about last weekend or the weekend coming up. And I couldn't quite shake the fact that people were living for 2/7 of their lives. And then I started seeing just the impact of it on how we worked together. I mean, people would talk about customers as means to an end, as how can we get more out of people. And you just saw this cycle of dehumanization happening in the work. It was at that time where I started doing an informal experiment around Washington, D.C., and I would just ask people about their work. I mean, it was interesting, like whether it's in Barnes and Noble, like talking to people about their jobs, they love about it, or talking to cab drivers. We took cabs back then, or talking to bus drivers. And what I've noticed very quickly is that the people who were truly joyful did not talk about what they did. They talked about who they did it for and who they did it with and why they did it. And I was like, my goodness, I want to learn about this. I want to learn how we develop that perspective. I want to learn how we develop systems in which people can see their significance and their purpose in what they're doing, and and focus on their use and usefulness versus just their acquisition and achievement. And I went and studied this. So that's the second chapter of my life. I went and studied this at university, and my dissertation research was what really prompted me on the path that I'm on now. Is I got to embed myself with a group of janitors, cleaners at a university for a year and a half, and we were trying to understand what made work meaningful. And what we found was that people who could see their significance had people who regularly reminded them of their significance in these very small moments of what's known as mattering, which I'm sure we'll get into. And just about that time, in the last 5 years, more and more people are experiencing invisibility, feeling overlooked, feeling unheard, feeling unseen, feeling lonely. And many of those symptoms are symptoms of a mattering deficit, that people aren't experiencing those moments of significance. And that's what led me to study this and be doing what I'm doing now. So I've had like 3 careers, I guess, because I did have a stint also in education where I was doing training and development and career coaching for university students during that time, right before I got my PhD. And I also noticed that we educate students for success, not for purpose.
I certainly experienced that as a student. I've had this conversation with several people on my podcast already about business school. When you
Hmm.
go through business school, you don't learn how to ensure people feel like they matter. You learn how to treat people like functions for your own success.
Yeah, you learn how to manage the outcomes of human energy, but not the practices that regenerate the human energy needed for those outcomes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm pretty sure if you stepped into any MBA program right now, it would still be the same type of content. So I think there's some evolution happening there, but not enough that based on the research that you've been doing and so many others as well, you would think business schools would pick up on that and start influencing their curriculum. I'd love to know, especially working with the janitors. That's so fascinating because I we often think about menial labor like that, and I've had conversations with folks who it was actually a senior leader in the biotech industry, and she told me that her dad had told her when she was a little girl, you need to view people the same, whether this is the janitor cleaning up your trash can at the end of the day in the office, or if it's the CEO. We're all humans. It doesn't matter what our function is. And that she kind of took that with her as she went up the ranks in the corporate world. What was your observation working with janitors, the ones who felt that strong connection to purpose and felt like they could see the bigger picture of how their work is meaningful? How did that influence their day to day versus the ones who didn't see that?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that, I know that saying, like, of I treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, but why isn't it reversed? I treat the
Yeah.
CEO with the same respect as the janitor. Why isn't the janitor the benchmark? I mean, they're the only reason why we have a facility in which to do the work. About 70% of the workforce is in frontline service work, that they don't have an office. They make everything else happen. But yet also in many conversations about work, we are not talking about that work, which is the majority of people. One thing that I learned is that there are 2 things that create a sense of meaningfulness, and it doesn't have much to do with what you do. It has to do with how you see what you do and what you experience while you're doing it. One of the janitors that I interviewed, and I'll remember this for a long time because I was a PhD student. I asked her, I said, "What's the most meaningful part of your job?" We asked them for moments of meaning. And she said, "It's cleaning the university bathrooms in the dormitories after the weekends." It sounds absolutely terrible. That's gross, right? So where all the students stay after the weekends, 2 days of having nobody in there cleaning. And she said, it's the part of my job that I hate the most, but every time I go into that bathroom, I say to myself, I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. And what we find is that people who experience a high level of purpose, they develop a so that mentality. They can link whatever it is that they're doing with its inevitable human impact while they're doing it, which helps them to see the purpose as they're doing the work versus wait to go to a training to be told what the purpose is or to read a mission statement on the wall. They actually craft work as purposeful. And that's why there's a difference between having a purpose and being purposeful. I know many people that have a big world changing purpose that don't experience purpose in their work. But we also found that those people who developed that mentality, they were the recipients of regular moments of mattering. Moments of mattering are moments in which somebody gives you the proof of your impact, gives you the evidence of your significance, that help you build the belief that you're significant and what you're doing is significant. For example, that janitor that I mentioned, and I talk about this right away in the book because it encapsulates what it means to have a moment of mattering and what that effect has. During her first few months on the job, she was miserable. She didn't want to be there. She told me that she wished she could have done something more with her life. She was near homelessness. She took the job just to have a job, which is also important to know that the meaning of work is different than the meaning in work. Someone can work for a paycheck and still need to experience purpose while they're there. That's the meaning in work. And she said that she was a terrible employee, but one supervisor noticed that she was struggling, brought her into a break room, opened a dictionary, and had her read the definition of custodian to her. To the supervisor out loud. A custodian is a person responsible for a building and everyone in it. And they said, look at all of these students. I mean, these are someone's child that they're entrusting you with, entrusting us with. And your job is to keep this place clean so they stay healthy. And she said, that moment changed everything. It was the first time in her life that someone showed her she was worthy. That's how you go from, why am I just a janitor, to I'm cleaning this bathroom so that these kids don't get sick. But we find that in almost every occupation, that in order to believe that you're significant, you must have people that remind you of your worthiness of significance. If you want people to contribute, they first have to believe they're worthy of contributing. If you want them to use their strengths, they first have to believe they have them. If you want people to share their voice, they first have to believe their voice is significant. And so there's two things: crafting a purposeful approach that that mentality, but you have to be in an ecosystem that reminds you of your significance so you can develop that belief that, yes, I am significant and what I'm doing is significant because someone has reflected that back to me.
That's incredible that really basic gesture of that leader made such an incredible impact on that woman and her viewpoint and how she's making an impact with her work.
One of the reasons why things like employee engagement have remained relatively unchanged for the last 2 decades, despite programs, initiatives, well-being programs, DEI programs, perks culture. One of the reasons why loneliness continues to increase is that we've neglected the interactional level. We've neglected the fact that someone's experience happens interaction by interaction. And until we change and reskill ourselves to show up in interactions to see, hear, value, and show the person how we're needed, none of these bigger outcomes will change. And so that's what this work really focuses on, and my work really focuses on, is that interactional level.
Yeah. This reminds me so much of the philosophy that Bob Chapman implemented over at Barry Waymiller, and I know you
Mhm,
appeared on
mhm.
Barry Waymiller's podcast a while ago, so your philosophies are very interlinked, and of course, his book was titled Everybody Matters. Yours is The Power of Mattering. It's very, very much intertwined. Where do you see your philosophy intersecting with what Bob Chapman built at Barry Waymiller around truly human leadership?
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to tell people that they matter. It takes skill to show them exactly how they matter. A lot of times, this has been an ethos in organizations or an ethic in organizations that, oh, our people matter, or our people are our greatest asset, or the values on the wall. But those are symbols of value. They're not the experience of feeling valued and knowing how you add value. That happens through interactions. And one of the ways that Barry Waymiller and Bob and his group have done this is that they've operationalized what it means to be a leader at Barry Waymiller. I really think we need to move towards seeing leadership as an occupation, a separate occupation that requires a separate set of skills, a separate set of minimum qualifications, a separate set of evaluation. Too often, many organizations treat leadership as an add-on, or, hey, because you're really technically and operationally sound, we're going to promote you to a leadership position and we'll send you to a few trainings on psychological safety and caring for people and employee engagement, and then we'll trust you to do the right thing. The problem is intuition doesn't scale very well, right? Skills and habits scale. So one of the things that they've done really well is they have leadership checklists where it's your checklist. These are the behaviors that you need to exhibit every single day to be a leader here. And this checklist, you're responsible for it every day. And we're going to tell employees what they should experience from you. And it takes this from common sense, from intuition to common practice. And I think that's the link in our work is that, you would never trust a pilot to fly an airplane based on intuition or because they happen to be a good airplane mechanic. Every pilot has a checklist because every time they go into that plane, they have to have articulated intention to say, here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to do it, regardless of how many times I've flown this plane, because this is what we know will keep this plane safe. Well, that's how we need to be approaching leadership. It is a separate occupation which requires a separate set of behaviors, and I think that that's what Barry Wehmiller has done.
Well, you've developed something similar with a mattering self-assessment for leaders. Now, I know it's more than one question, but just for the sake of simplicity, if there was one question in that assessment that a leader listening right now could use to really say, am I really doing this well with my employees? Am I showing that they matter? Is there one that would really immediately show, yeah, you're doing this, or nope, you need some help?
Yeah, I don't know if in the assessment I could pick one, but I can give you a general question that you can ask yourself. Think of someone that you rely on, and have you told them in the last 7 days, right? I'll give you another one. Think of someone you're grateful for on your team and write down their name, and then write down the last time you explicitly told them and they heard you. Right? When's the last time you named someone's unique gifts relative to other people? And I mean, really named like what their unique impact was and how that impact changed the team for the better that day? When's the last time you named that? When's the last time you showed someone proof of impact? It's these questions that um, allow us, again, to take these very intuitive ideas and move them into the strategic common practice realm from common sense. Some of our work extends for what Bob Chapman's work has done in the organization. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do is we've tried to look at broadly what are all of the possible human skills needed to create moments of mattering. So we researched thousands of people and we asked them, when you most feel that you matter, what is happening? And what we found is that everybody who experiences mattering experiences some version of three elements: feeling noticed, feeling seen and heard, feeling affirmed, and feeling needed. And then through that, we were able to mine out 25 distinct skills that could be both evaluated on the individual level, like you can self-evaluate, which is some of the questions we just did, and that you could evaluate others on the frequency at which they're doing those behaviors. But I highly recommend that you evaluate frequency of behavior for yourself versus how much you think you're doing something. And then I highly encourage organizations to also evaluate frequency of observed behavior amongst their team. So if you ask yourself, how frequently over the past week have I named my team members' unique gifts relative to others on the team? Then you should be asking your people, how frequently has your leader named your unique gifts this week or this quarter relative to those on your team? And you should be talking about those things.
Yeah, I love the frequency aspect because I feel like a lot of organizations fall into the trap of, we'll wait until and then the annual review to have these conversations, and
Yeah.
that it's just implied. Of course, they know what their talents are. It should be implied. I'm paying them. I'm giving them a paycheck. I'm rewarding them for their good work.
The big problem is that we have to acknowledge that we have an overconfidence bias when it comes to these things. We've called these things soft and simple for the last 50 years. Anytime your brain sees something as soft or simple, you're susceptible to an overconfidence bias. You think you're better at it than we are. We don't approach it with much rigor. Like, for example, think about the last time you were in a meeting talking about budgetary concerns or strategic priorities, probably frequently. Think about the last time you were in a meeting scanning your teams to see who you needed to notice more, who is unseen, unheard, unvalued, right? Often we relegate that to if we have time for it. But ironically, the very energy you need to make sure the budget's aligned, to make sure the strategic priorities get done, reside in how people feel. But we often just leave it up to chance. We don't approach it with rigor. The need is to approach it with rigor. One of my favorite 1-star reviews of my book is, no, I'm serious. Like I love the 1-star reviews because they teach you a lot. One of my favorite 1-star reviews is, this is kindergarten level basic, and it says basically, see, hear, and value people. If you can't do that, then you should get this book. And that's it right there. We have an overconfidence bias when it comes to our ability to do these things, because if this common sense were common practice, 3 out of 10 people would not report that they feel invisible in work. 7 out of 10 people would not say that they're emotionally uninvested in work despite billions of dollars invested in the employee experience. 4 out of 10 people wouldn't say that they felt undervalued in work. 4 out of 10, just 4 out of 10 people say that someone cares about them as a person in work. Productivity remains inconsistent. Turnover goes up and down in 5-year cycles. We're living in a finite game where we've expected people to care without doing the rigorous work to ensure they feel cared for.
And I love your reference to Simon Sinek's Infinite Game
Yes.
book. Yeah. Um, it's true. It's so funny to me that the 1-star review comment, because it's it is basic. It is kindergarten level. Absolutely. I read your book. 100%. We should all be
I
like,
agreed too. I agreed
but
with it. That's why I liked it. It's my favorite 1-star review. But it
but
proves
yeah,
it,
we're not
it
doing
actually
it.
proves, it's ironically proves the need for the book.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. Yes, we all should know how to do this. The problem is that we're not. And you can't change something you can't name. And if we want to change this, we have to be able to name and rigorously practice and develop and evaluate the skills to do this and to reclaim the quality of our interpersonal interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's as incredible. We all know what kind of climate we're living in right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I feel like people like you and me who see the obviousness, like the obvious powerful impact of such a basic skill, right? How it impacts productivity, turnover rates, retention. I have this philosophy where I really feel like leaders look at KPIs from a rear view mirror lens.
Hmm.
We're looking at turnover rate, we're looking at retention, but that's after the John has already left. So
Hmm.
now we're like, oh, John left. Oh, now we need to figure out how to keep people. Like, what are we
Hmm.
doing? But we're not looking through the windshield view of what can we do now? What KPIs can we put in place now that will prevent that high turnover rate, that will keep our people happy, that will give them a career path beyond just the 2 to 3 years where and then we see the others, just cycling through, and then we have to train new people and onboard new people. This same cycle is happening over and over again. We're still doing the same leadership behaviors over and over again and then wondering why.
Hmm.
It's very short, it's short-termism. So very
Hmm.
much anti the belief that you put forward about the infinite game and looking to the long-term organizational health piece. How do we make this mindset shift as leaders, especially when we're looking at earnings and shareholder value and quarterly earnings, especially. So we have that short-term lens that we're being held accountable for as leaders. But this is what Wall Street wants us to do. But meanwhile, we're not really measuring the long-term impact of taking care of our people. And in the end, if we're looking at it through that lens, that will actually create even more business success. We just keep focusing on that short-term view. What is your take on that?
Yeah, first, I want to express that I have a lot of empathy for leaders who are in systems that incentivizes them not to take a long-term view.
Yeah.
So we have to understand that if you put a well individual in an unwell system, they will eventually become an unwell individual. I mean, we can't rely on people to be morally good in systems that incentivize them not to be. So, I mean, we're incentivizing people on short-term gain. So if that was my lived reality, if my worth was dependent on a quarterly earnings report, I don't know who I would become in terms of how I lead. So I think that that's important to have empathy there. But I also think it's important to use that empathy to ask critical questions. Like one of my favorite questions to ask a skeptical CEO, potentially of a publicly traded company, is name one financial metric that is not mediated through a human being. Like what? Name one. And I've talked to publicly traded CEOs, and they can't name them, obviously. But then if I ask, what is the ideal state of a human being who's producing that result? And they'll say things like, well, they should care. They should have a leader that supports them. They should be in a given responsibility. I mean, they should feel that the work they're doing is meaningful. They should see how what they're doing makes end goals possible. Almost every business leader, no matter how hardened they are, would say that and has said that. The question becomes, I say, like, what are you rigorously doing in your organization to systematize that? And that's where usually a light bulb goes off, that we're focusing on lagging indicators. Lagging indicators, profit, productivity, value. Those are all lagging indicators. The leading indicator of every lagging indicator in an organization is human energy. And oftentimes, the way leaders are approaching it, the behaviors that leaders currently operate within, extract human energy without regenerating it. And that's when you get into these cycles over and over and over again. And I will say that many times what's happened is this brings into the fact that we've relied on people to just be good people to do these things. The soft skills aspect, I'll go back to that because if we don't view leading others as a separate occupation with a separate set of standards and skills, and we don't approach these soft skills rigorously and see them as hard, essential minimum qualifications for leading people, then this is what happens. So I think it can be both. I think you can pursue outcomes, but you can't pursue outcomes without building the infrastructure to regenerate the human energy needed for those outcomes. It really is confusing when people call this soft or simple. I mean, have you ever followed anybody as a leader who didn't care for you? I mean, have you
Yeah.
ever been have you ever been motivated and charged up to do something when you thought it was futile? Right? It's incompatible. It's impossible for anything to matter to a person who doesn't believe that they matter. I mean, if I were to summarize the work, motivation, and performance research in the last 50 years, I'd summarize it in that sentence. It's almost impossible for anything to matter to someone who doesn't believe that they matter. People do not care if they don't feel cared for. So we want people to care. We want people to add value. We have to do the rigorous work to ensure they feel valued.
Yeah. No, I love that perspective, and I think it makes so much sense, and I love the way you address the skeptical CEO of saying,
Yeah, I
"Oh,
mean, I love that. I just had somebody last week be like, "So you want me to just coddle people and not have high expectations?" Right? And I said, "No, coddling is overprotecting them from challenge. Showing people how they matter is reinforcing their worth and capability to meet the challenge." I'm not talking about coddling. I'm not talking about protecting people. I'm not talking about being soft. I'm not talking about not having high expectations. In fact, if you go look at the research on like parenting, on the parenting style, because we're both parents, the parenting style that, regardless of all the books and Instagram influencers that you hear talking about parenting, it's very simple. I mean, the parenting style has the most empirical support that creates resilient, well adjusted, highly purposeful people and in their across the lifespan. High support and high challenge. That's it. It's simple. And so when you get into the workplace, people all of a sudden human psychology changes. It doesn't. People need high challenge and high support. What the problem is in most organizations is the skills. People leave the support up to chance.
yeah." Well, and they're not held accountable for it, typically.
They're not held accountable for it.
They're not measured for it.
People who perform well, and I mean perform well as indicated by achieving lagging indicators, are promoted.
Yep.
And choice is communication. So when you make a choice as an organization, you're communicating something to people. If you choose to promote people who are high performing, quote unquote, that treat people poorly along the way, you're telling people that outcomes matter more than how you treat people. But if you redefine high performance as achieving results while treating people with dignity, respect, and care, which ironically, I think that's what good leadership is you're not really a good leader if you treat people poorly but perform well. I mean, you should be able, if you're a good leader, you should be able to figure it out how to do both, in my opinion, if you're such a good business leader. Great business leaders treat people well, dignity, respect, kindness, while achieving results. And if you redefine high performance that way and only promote people who are measured on both, that changes. That's a choice that communicates what you really value and it's real. And you'll see that flywheel in your culture. Barry Waymill is a great example of that. They have this leadership checklist. Here's what you should expect every single day. And that flywheel just changes culture when it's real.
Are there any other companies you've worked with apart from Barry Waymiller? Because I feel like they're the example that always comes up in every every book I read. Was there an organization that really stood out to you as far as creating that flywheel and really building that culture that was
Yeah, and I mean, I'll disclose that this is an organization I worked with, but American Express Global Business Travel is an organization that had thousands of travel agents post COVID with high both involuntary attrition and voluntary attrition. And I remember that one of the senior vice presidents called me up. I mean, I had read an article or something and just said, I think the issue is that our people need to feel that they matter again. And so one of the things we did is we got all of their 600 leaders from across the world together. And we introduced this concept of mattering, had them think about when in their work they most felt that they mattered, and really write down and mine out the skills that other people use to show them. And then just after that session, one of the senior leaders said, "This helped give me permission to be human again." But then we had those leaders actually get in groups and come up with behaviors they would commit to for everybody in the organization under their care to make sure people felt noticed, affirmed, and needed, which are these three practice areas of mattering. And we had like over 520 behaviors, and we chiseled them down to 5 for each of those practices. 5 core behaviors that everybody should be know how to do and be expected to do for noticing people, seeing and hearing them, affirming them, showing them how they make a unique difference, and showing them how they're needed. And then they created this blueprint, and it said, "We believe that every employee should feel noticed, affirmed, and needed here. We will do this by," and it was these 15 measurable behaviors. Well, they gave that to all the employees and they said, "Here's what you can expect from each of your leaders. If it's not happening, here's how you can connect with us in HR to have a conversation." And then the leaders themselves self-assess themselves quarterly on these behaviors that they came up with. They started assessing their teams on the behaviors that they committed to. They would have quarterly meetings to talk about it. Their entire leadership development structure was built on equipping them with the skills and abilities to consistently do the behaviors they committed to. And attrition dropped by 50% in a year and a half,
Wow.
voluntary attrition. Engagement went up measurably. It's sustained now over 3 years. But I use that as an example because there was this blueprint, the expectations were clear, people were measured on it, the environment developed the skills, helped them develop the skills to do it. But then I would say that it was their behaviors, it was the leaders that they wanted to be.
Yeah. So they made it their own.
They made it their own.
Yeah.
And that's what's key. Like the leader said, "This is the kind of leader I want to be." And once you have that commitment, that's where things really start to change in an authentic way.
Yeah. I love that because then the leaders can align it with the organization's values and make it feel like it's very unique to their organization, how they
Yeah.
want to show up in their workplace. And it's not some consultant came in and said, this
Right.
is what you need to do.
Yeah. And one of the things that I found is that I actually find more teams within organizations committing to do this than organizations itself. So I actually don't think the organization needs to shift. Completely, if you're a middle manager right now, if you're a leader sort of in the middle, you have control. You have power over every interaction you have. Your organization cannot take away your interactional power, the power to show up and make the next person you interact with feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. And so a lot of my work, and you'll notice this in the book, a lot of my case studies are with middle team leaders who choose to reclaim their interactional power, to not become the leader they don't want, and become the leader, as Simon Sinek says, to become the leader they wish they had. But they choose to architect their daily interactions in which they feel seen, heard, in which other people feel seen, heard, valued, and needed. They choose to assess themselves on this. They choose to assess their teams on this. And then all of a sudden, what happens in the organization is people start asking me, "Zach, can you go see what's happening in this team? What are they doing differently?" And that's how a lot of these movements and organizations I've seen grow from the grassroots.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the diffusion of innovations. You have the early adopters the middle managers coming to you and say, hey, I want to do this. And then everybody's looking at the team thinking, what's their secret sauce? I want to get involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, a story that I had was I worked with the National Park Service, and there was a maintenance supervisor who took over this team that had really low morale, high turnover. It was in a maintenance team for a very remote, rural national park. Really hard to recruit people, and he took over, and all of a sudden, like within a year, turnover drastically went down. People were telling their friends about these jobs, applications went up, and everybody was trying to figure out why. So I got to go hang out with him for a little bit, and he had this practice where he would go around the park every week and he'd take pictures of whether it's like a bridge that was repaired if visitors were walking over it, pictures of projects his team worked on. He would take pictures of like a shorter line for a bathroom if a bathroom was reopened. And every Friday he sent this email and it just said, "Look what you did," was the subject line. And he attached like 40 pictures. It's like a photo album. That was
You
it.
mentioned that in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it though. I mean, that was it. And he told me, he goes, Zach, the difference is on my team, nobody can question whether they matter because I give them photographic evidence every week. And what I loved about that was that it was a diligent, deliberate practice and a pretty innovative like practice, but he was not leaving it up to chance. He was showing people proof of impact. I mean, how many of us do that every week? How many of us have a practice to show somebody their proof of impact, to collect and tell those stories of significance? So what we find is these little practices, these little skills that go a long way. And everybody wanted to work for him. I once had an ER nurse who she had a little memo pad and she would write down all of the positive patient outcome stories from her shift before. And then she started her daily huddles by going over these positive patient outcomes and naming who worked on them. The other teams in the hospital started their huddles by saying, okay, here's what's wrong clinically in every room. Go have a great shift. Guess who people would beg to be on their team? It was this charge nurse. They loved when she was there, but it's because she deliberately, diligently made sure people felt significant.
That's incredible. I just love how simple it is and easy to implement. I think we tend to get wrapped up in making it overly complex. Like, oh, employee engagement, we're going to send out a huge survey that takes 20 minutes to complete and we're going to analyze the crap out of it for several months and then distribute the results to the leaders and figure out who our employee engagement champions are. And then there's excitement for a few months and then it falls flat until the
Hmm.
next survey comes out. But what you're saying is all you have to do is just a really small gesture, like
Yeah.
calling people out in a huddle or taking pictures and sending them to the staff. So, of all these stories that you've gathered in your research and in working with clients, if there's a leader listening today and thinking, okay, all this sounds great, but gosh, I don't even know where to start. What is one small step a leader could take to just work towards creating an environment of mattering?
I want to go back to your observation too, really quick, that like how we've tried to solve engagement. We're seeing this now again with recognition. Everybody realized that recognition is important. So the recognition platform industry, software industry, is now a $19 billion industry. It's projected to be a $50 billion industry by 2050. So these are where you can go on and give peer kudos and give people peer nominated awards and all of these symbols of value. But the research actually finds that symbols of value in the absence of the daily experience of feeling valued by the people around you, actually don't do anything to move the needle on engagement. So what happens is we try to invest in programs or initiatives or platforms or operating systems, which is another buzzword in the organizational culture design space, or whatever it is. And those things don't value people. Only people value people. And I think this is very important. Like, you can't give somebody an award, give somebody a new perk if they go in and experience feeling unseen and unheard and undervalued every day. The only way to change it is in an interaction. And so we really have to tackle the interactional level. But if there's one thing that I would leave people with to do this, it's actually a very simple question. And I would just ask your people, when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? I mean, and really listen and really write down what they say and do more of those things. There was a journalist who interviewed me for a magazine article, and the magazine article never got published, so I didn't know if I was a bad interview. But we connected really well afterwards. And she said to me, Zach, I have a preteen daughter. I'm really struggling to connect with her. Any advice you have for me regarding this mattering stuff? And I was like, whoa. I was like, why don't you just ask her, when you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? And I didn't think anything of it. And like a couple weeks later, I got this long email from her. And she said, I asked my daughter that question and her answer surprised me. She said, it's when I bring her to school in the morning and we're driving, just being in silence, listening to her favorite music. And she said, I always thought of that as just a routine in my day, but it was everything to her. And I never would have known that if I didn't ask that question. I think that that's the most important question we can ask anybody in any relationship, especially at work. That'll give you better data than any engagement survey, any climate survey, any culture surveys. When you feel that you matter to me, what am I doing? When you feel that you matter here, what are we doing? And collect that data and do more of those things.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it's just a testament to that we just need to show up.
Mm.
We just need to show up for people in our lives.
Yeah.
I had a
And it's
very
getting
similar
harder to
situation
do.
with my 5-year-old because we're moving at a such a fast pace or
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're moving at, yeah, hurry and care can't coexist.
yeah.
You can't care for anything, whether it's a child or a pet or a house plant, if you don't understand it. And understanding takes time. Tell me about your 5-year-old though. You said you had a similar
No.
experience.
Yeah, no, I was just saying I just the other day actually, because when you were telling me about this woman who sent you a note, we were sitting at the kitchen table coloring a picture together. And we had a good bit of downtime together that day, which was rare for that week because we were just like any other parent, just logistics, drop off, pickups, rushing people around, cooking dinner. But we had, intimate time together, just sitting there coloring pictures. And he looked at me and he said, "Mommy, I really enjoy being with you."
Mhm.
And that's all he said. But I think to me that communication was, thank you for being present. Thank you for just being here next to me,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
going off and
Yep.
doing chores and, basically being in the background somewhere, but not really present with me. And I think that's sometimes all leaders need to do is just be there. Just show up.
Yeah, and when I ask, like, if I asked everybody listening, "When's the time you most felt that you mattered to a leader?" What were they doing? You'd hear that all over and over. Time and attention. Like listening, giving me the time, remembering something about me, remembering a strength, showing me the difference that it made. I mean, what's the ROI of that, right? That's what we're really asking. Like, what's the ROI of being present for another human being? Like, if I see another article that says like the ROI of empathy or the ROI of caring, I'm gonna like lose my mind. What's the ROI of hugging your mom? I mean, we shouldn't need. There's no ROI to this stuff. I mean, this is essential human psychology. It's essential human needs. And if a leader's job is people, to influence people, a leader's job is to meet those basic human needs. And one of those basic human needs, I would say the need that underscores all other needs is the need to matter, to be important to another person, to know that our presence and absence means just one thing to one person. And that's what we're doing. We're meeting basic human needs and human instincts. And you shouldn't need a business case for that.
Well said, and a beautiful way to wrap up the dialogue. I love that. And I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with me today, your research, your passion as well. I can feel your passion in your voice when you talk about this. And what we need to do is just clone you and have more Zachs all around to spread this message and get the message out because it's a really important one. Thank you for helping us connect back to our humanity today, Zach.
No problem. And I hope it's hopeful because really your next great leadership act is your next interaction. So it's accessible. You can do it right now. You don't have to go buy anything else to do this.
That's what I love about no operating system, no platform, no initiative. It's super easy.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, of course.
If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about the Empathy Collective, check out our website, theempathycollective.com. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.